For today's DC Multiverse review, we are looking at Ice. And before I talk about the accessories and the figure, let's take a quick look at the data profile card. As you can see, there is this beautiful comic book artwork of Ice. As for the source material, it is from Fire and Ice. And on the backside, you do have your usual read-up for who the character is. Her real name is Tora. I am going to butcher the pronunciation of her last name. Olaf's daughter. I think that's how you say it. It reads, born with cryogenic powers, Norwegian Tora Olaf's daughter decided to leave her native country to pursue a superhero career as Ice. She soon formed a close friendship with fellow heroine Fire. Ice was selected as the Scandinavian member for the UN-sponsored Justice League International team. On their first mission to Peru, she was caught in a thermal blast from a giant alien robot, forcing the team to retreat. The JLI subsequently confronted the robot's master, the alien resource plunderer, Paraxis. I think that's how you pronounce his name, and drove him away. And that is a pretty good read-up on who Ice is as a character. And let's move on to the accessories that are included with this action figure. So, Ice does not have any interchangeable hands or alternate head sculpts. All she comes with are these ice effect pieces that we have seen before. And if I remember correctly, they were introduced in the Batman and Robin Mr. Freeze Build-A-Figure wave. So I will do some comparisons with those previous pieces just to show the differences. But before I do that, let's talk about these first two smaller pieces that are included. And as you can see, these are meant for the arms of the action figure. And I guess they can work in replicating that she's using her powers. But if you've ever watched Justice League Unlimited and Batman Brave and the Bold, the way that she uses her ice powers is very simplistic. She just fires ice out of her fists when she has her hands curled up in a fist form. She never has like ice, covering her hands. I don't remember if she ever, done that. But these pieces, the way that they're molded is because they were meant for, to simulate that someone's arms got frozen over by Mr. Freeze. Not in the sense of like, oh, this character is using their powers. So if you use these pieces the way that they were intended, yes, you can have a villain character look like they're frozen and they're not able to move. But the problem is, because she doesn't have any blast effect looking ice pieces, it doesn't really show that she froze somebody in ice. You know what I mean? But if you want these to be like, oh, maybe she encased her arms in ice and she's using it as a way to punch through something, that could also work in that sense. So these smaller pieces are okay for that sort of, purpose if you want to imagine that's what they are for. Now, the way that they are painted, I think they're done nicely because there is this sort of wash over them, which I don't think the previous ones had. All right, let's bring in the small piece from the other time that this was used. And as you can see, there is a massive difference between the colors here. This new paint job that they did is much better than this, because this just looks like water. It doesn't really look like ice. This has an ice sort of feel to it because of the coating that they added. So there are the differences between these two smaller pieces and the other smaller piece here. It's pretty much the same difference, right, with the colors. And now moving on to the bigger pieces, and this just continues my point. So these pieces were introduced with the Robin figure, and these are meant to go on the legs of an action figure to create that effect that, oh, maybe Mr. Freeze hit them in the leg with his freeze gun and now they can't move on their legs because it's frozen. So yeah, as a power effect, she's not going to be using these effects to like kick people with ice. I guess you can imagine that maybe she encased her leg in ice and she's kicking her enemy with ice. I don't know. But, it works in the sense that it looks like it froze somebody shut so they can't walk, right? Like an enemy combatant. But in terms of some sort of power ability for her, yeah, it doesn't really work in that sort of purpose. And as you can see, the paint job is also done nicely as well. And that's the only good thing here, is that the wash for these ice effects look better than the previous ones. So let me just bring in the other bigger piece. As you can see, there's the difference between the two of them, right? It's the same exact accessory, just repainted a little bit different. And this new one, again, just better. And here is the comparison with these two pieces, as you can see right there. And that is pretty much all the accessories that she comes with. It's just these ice effect parts. And as for the rest of the content in the box, of course, she does have the regular DC figure stand, this whole thing, and the data profile card. And yeah, that is pretty much it for accessories. Let's move on to the aesthetics of this figure. Taking a closer look at Ice here, I want to start with this white top area first, because this surprised me a lot. I did not expect that this would be a cloth goods material. I thought it was a soft PVC material that was glued onto her torso, because the product images made it look like that to me for some reason. I didn't think it would ever turn out to be a cloth material, but I'm very happy that it is, because that really did surprise me. Now, something I do want to warn everyone about is that you do want to be careful when you move this figure in terms of the articulation, because this material here, since it's like this very thin piece of cloth material, if you're not careful, it might rip potentially. So you don't want to fidget with this too hard, because whenever they use thin material like this, it's always scary, because if you rip it, well, it's game over unless you know how to fix it. So yeah, do be careful with the cloth here. Now, for the rest of the details of this figure, this is going to come down to two sort of perspectives that I want to basically cover. So let's start with the first one. If you're someone like me who loves when comic book figures have like extra texturing to their costumes, even if that texturing detail isn't there, this will probably be great for you, and you probably wouldn't care if it doesn't match the source material. So one of the biggest differences that you can tell right away from the look of this figure is that her costume doesn't match up with the source material here, except for the white, top that she's wearing. The rest of the suit is very texturized. And this body buck is a reuse of the Catwoman one from the Batman 2022 movie. Is it a good reuse for Ice here? Well, if you are somebody that loves textured costumes with all these details that you can see sculpted, and you don't mind the heavy texturing, then yes, this body buck works in that perspective. And to me, I'm fine with it, because I do like the added details that are there, as well as a slight retooling down here with the legs. But if you are somebody that prefers simplicity, in this case, where simplicity would have actually benefited this figure instead of having to rely on the heavily textured sort of look, that's where the source material version of the costume would have been a better option. And the reason why I also want to mention this is because, as you can see with her white top, it blends better if the rest of the body buck was done in a more simpler fashion and did not have all this texturing detail that is present. So that's why, for me, I'm kind of in the middle where, yeah, I'm okay with the textured costume, but if it was done in a very simplistic way, I would have been fine with it either way. But if you are in the divide, well, do let me know in the comments below what you think, what they should have done, right? Because in this case, reusing this Catwoman body buck, it's alright. It's not like the worst reuse we've seen from Mcfarlane Toys, but, if they really wanted to go the simpler way, I think the Batgirl body buck would have been the better option to go with, because unfortunately, from what I can tell, I think it's been pretty obvious, the female superheroes don't have a generic body buck like the males do. Because if you look at a lot of the more recent male superhero characters that we've been getting, there have been quite a few body bucks that have basically become generic in terms of how they can be used and reused. So the female superheroes don't have that in this line, which is quite unfortunate. But the one for Batgirl would have worked in this case if they wanted to make it closer to the source material. So I just want to mention these two perspectives because I know some people don't like this figure, mainly because they don't like the over texturization here because, you know, the source material art just looks better. Why couldn't we have gotten this, right? I can understand that point of view as well. But in the end of the day, it is what it is, and I'm fine with the outcome because in the end, we finally got our Ice figure, and that is the most important thing, getting a new character that we haven't gotten in this line. So I am fine with this result. All right, let's move on to the head sculpt because that is probably the best part of this figure. The head sculpt is beautiful. I love the way that they sculpted her face. Even though she's not smiling, she does have a, you know, very normal expression. I can't really tell what her expression is, but I am fine with the way that the face sculpt came out. And the hair coloring is also done nicely too because you have this white shading mixed with a little bit of this sort of like ice blue color streaks for the tips of her hair, which is done very nicely. And you can see the same thing on the back of her hair, right? This sort of paint color. So the overall head sculpt itself is beautiful. And looking at some more details, let's just take a closer look at the texturing. So as you can see, all they did was they just repainted that body buck, but they divided the blue and the white areas, right? Which isn't bad. There is a little bit of QC issues here, so you do want to be, you know, aware of those problems if you care about paint QC. And you can see the lines right there between the dyes. And then, of course, the retooling down here, you do have, you know, these sort of like snow boot elements, right, for her costume. These are very similar to the designs that I see on He-Man, right, with his boots that he's wearing. So yeah, overall, not a bad looking figure. And again, I'm okay with the way that this figure came out. But for some of you, if you have your opinions on whether you like this result or not, do let me know in the comments below what you think. So let's move on to the articulation of the figure now. And let's start with the head sculpt. So can Ice look up? Not exactly, because of the way that her neck joint is sculpted. Can she look down? Yes, she can. Can she turn her head left and right? She can do so with no problems. She can also tilt her head side to side. So the articulation for the head sculpt is decent, but it does have some restrictions. And moving on to the articulation of her arm, she can lift out this much. She can swing them back and forth with no problems. She does have bicep swivels up here. She also has double jointed articulation in the arms. And she does have swivel in the hands as well as wrist articulation. And for the upper torso, this is where you want to be careful. Again, as I said, this is a thin piece of cloth material. So if your copy of the upper torso is very stiff, I do recommend using a hairdryer. I don't know if you want to submerge this figure into hot water, especially because of this cloth piece. So however you can fix it, just be careful when you're doing so. Now, for my copy of the figure, her upper torso articulation is really loose. Not like super loose, but just the, you know, the good kind where I don't have to worry about, like, you know, it being stiff when I move the articulation here. So yeah, there's a really good range of rotation, but when it comes to leaning forward and leaning back, not much you can do there. And for the waist articulation, it does rotate a little bit, as you can see, really stiff on my copy, but it doesn't lean forward or lean back either. So yeah, there are some restrictions right there with the upper torso and the waist articulation, but I'm pretty sure if you modified, you could probably get it to loosen up a lot more. But again, do be careful because of this piece right here. Now, let's move on to the articulation with the legs. Can she do the splits? Yes, she can. Not bad. Well, it's not a full-on split, but that's still better than Metamorpho. And before I forget, does she have upper thigh swivel? Yes, she does. That is great. You know, a lot of these figures sometimes they don't even have that upper swivel movement, so it's surprising when they do. And can she do a kick? That's a pretty decent kick in my opinion. And she does have double jointed in the legs, as well as articulation in the feet, swivel, and toe articulation. And that is pretty much all the articulation for Ice. Now it's time for some comparisons. And for the first figure we are going to bring in, here she is next to her best friend, Fire. This is a duel that I've been hoping to complete ever since this figure released back in 2024. And I'm just really happy to see the two of them are finally together. And yes, this is the powered up version. Unfortunately, there is no depowered version of her where she has her normal look, which is quite unfortunate. I do hope that Mcfarlane still gives us one before the license ends, but I doubt that's going to happen. So, you know, in this sort of situation, you just got to work with what you got to work with in your shelf. And I am very happy that these two figures are finally together. So there was the first comparison. And for the second comparison, here she is next to the DC Classics version of Batgirl. So if you do want Ice and Batgirl working together, that is also a possibility right there. So there's that. And for the last comparison, here is Ice next to Zatanna. And yes, I will have reviews for her and Batgirl very soon. I am getting started on those reviews right now, so do be patient. But yeah, there are the two characters together, and these two look nice together as well, since they are both comic book versions. And that is going to do for today's comparisons. And if you found today's review on Ice informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.